Okay. So I think every one of you know where we use Databricks in our project. Roshni might have discussed about the architecture. So where do we use that? So in getting the data from landing to refine and from refine to consumption, we'll be using the Databricks. Okay. అన్న మీ దగ్గర అది ఉందా అంటే పీపీటీ ఉందా?
ఏపీపీటీరా ఏది అదే మంద
ఒక్కసారి షేర్ చేయండి.
నీకు ఏం కావాలి? మన ఆర్కిటెక్చర్ కావాలా?
ఆర్కిటెక్చర్ ఒకసారి షేర్ చేయండి, లేటెస్ట్ ఏంటి జస్ట్ మినిట్. ఓకే,
వెతకాలి అంటే ఉంది కానీ దొరికిందా? అంటే నేను వేరే ఫార్మాట్లో పెట్టుకున్నా, మరి అది ఓకే అంటే మీకు షేర్ చేస్తాను. అంటే అదే కొంచెం నేను ఇంకా సరే షేర్ చేస్తున్నా చూడు, నచ్చితే
దొరికిందన్న డిజైన్ అంటే ఓకే
సరే అయితే పీకేస్తున్నా.
ఓకే
సరే షేర్ చేయ.
3M డిజైన్ share it. Okay, let me now say what is in screen.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So we have around 4 sources here: OCP, FS, SharePoint, and we also have Azure DevOps. That is one more source here. So from OCP to landing data lake, we'll be using Databricks, and from FS we'll be using Data Factory, and from SharePoint and TFS we'll be using Databricks again. So we are pulling data from 3 or 4 sources using Databricks, and from one source we are pulling from Data Factory. So in future we'll also migrate this also to Databricks. So here OCP we'll be using JDBC drivers to get the data into data lake, and the rest of the 3 or APIs will be hitting the APIs of the corresponding source, and we'll get the incremental data from the sources, and we'll be dumping it into landing data lake. So all this process is done by Databricks, and on top of that, we'll be merging the data with the existing refined files using Databricks again. And here we'll have the merged data. And on top of the merged data, we'll be using Databricks again to get your data warehouse structure. This is the consumption. So we'll be using Databricks in 3 layers. I mean, in loading the data into 3 layers. So this is where we use Databricks. So do anyone of you know what is a Databricks and why is it used?
So Databricks is a kind of analytical like ETL tool, and we can perform even analytics on using this Databricks, and we can build ML models.
Okay, so is Databricks? Yeah, continue.
We can write a code in Python, Scala, and R, I think.
Okay, so that's correct. It's actually a big data solution. And do you know whether it is a free source or open? Actually, it is a free source. It is built on top of Spark framework.
Okay, Apache Spark.
Yeah, it is built on top of Apache Spark, and this guy will provide us 4 languages to write the code. As you just mentioned, it's Python, Spark, that is Python, Spark SQL, R, and one more thing. What's that? Scala. Sorry. Yeah, the main one is Scala. So the framework is written in Scala actually. So whatever the code we write, ultimately it will get converted into Scala and then execute. Then it executes. So let me just give an overview of what is a Spark. So Spark is an advanced concept of MapReduce. So what's the framework consists of? So it consists of a master node and n number of child nodes. So if we just see here, this is the architecture of Spark. So the Databricks will work similarly. So we'll have one master node and n number of worker nodes. And we'll have one cluster manager. It will allocate the corresponding memories or corresponding cores to a certain worker node. So we'll have a worker node and executor. So what is a worker node and what is an executor? So consider you have around 10 cores of CPU, and you will be dividing. So consider the 10 cores of CPU as one worker node. And if you want to divide that into a number of executors, you can divide the worker node again into executors. So ultimately, the master node will work with executors and not the worker node. But in most of the times, in general, we'll consider worker node and executor as the same. But worker node can also be split into executors. The executor is the actual CPU or actual component where the data gets transformed. So if you see here, so yeah. So this Spark context will set the executors. So inside a worker node, we can also split the worker node into two executors. If your worker node is 4 cores, we can consider 2 cores of each executor. And all the work is done by this cluster manager. If we are working on Spark, we should be handling all this. But as we are using Databricks guy will handle all of this and he will set the Spark context for us. We just need to write code on top of that. So this is the high level architecture of Databricks. So when you read a file, what happens? This driver will get all the metadata of the file and will send the corresponding messages to worker nodes to get the corresponding files. So I have a 10 MB file. So each worker node will go to the file and he'll get the corresponding 2 MB files of each. And they process accordingly. So that is regarding worker, that is regarding the architecture. And coming to the execution plan of the Spark, in general, Spark executes as a DAG flow. So what is a DAG? It's a directed acyclic graph. I think I have an image for that. Okay. Oh. Okay. These are all the images. Not getting any perfect image. Okay, let me just like this. Okay. So consider this. So consider this as our execution plan. So what is he trying to do? He is trying to read an input and convert it into RDDs. I'll just explain you what an RDD and data frame and data set is in a minute. And he is trying to union two of the files and then join the file with this file. And then output save as 60 file. And on top of this RDD is also filtering one more thing. So if this is the execution plan, and what happens here is, so he will just build a DAG before executing. That is directed acyclic graph. So he will just build this graph. That is a kind of a plan. And we'll have a concept of actions and transformations in Spark. So what does an action mean and what does a transformation mean? Do anyone know about that? What's an action and what's a transformation is? Okay. ఓకే. అర్చన మీరు ఆల్రెడీ డేటాబ్రిక్స్ పైన పనిచేశారుగా? హలో.
Yes, Santu. Like,
ఓకే.
yes, transformations and actions. Like if you transformations are like some maps, partitions, like that.
Okay. Can you explain DAG once and how does this DAG work? I mean, if you know it, and if not, I'll continue.
DAG is like a it's a execution, like a execution plan.
Okay.
Like if like transformations like map, platform, filter, union, we have all those transformations.
Okay.
Whenever
Okay, let me just continue then. Okay. So as she just mentioned, actions are like unions, joins, and filters, all those. So so what I'll write the code. So I'll write a code to read the data frame. So reading a data frame, and then unioning two data frames, and then join, and finally I'll write it to a file. Okay. So here this join, union are called as actions, and writing it to a file is to a file is action, and unions and joins and filters or transformations. So here in all the transformation phases, he'll just build the query. He'll just build the plan, and whenever there is an action to the corresponding data frame, he'll run all the code at that time. So this is called as an lazy evolution. So what is that? So he will not run till an action is performed on any data frame. So if you just see this, sorry. So if you just see any of the notebook, okay, let me just take an empty notebook. Okay. Okay. So what we are doing here, so it is, I'll just explain the UI part. You don't worry about that. And here what we are doing, we are just reading a file. So I have a file in particular location. I am reading a file, and he just got the metadata of the file, and he did not read it completely. So if you see here, it's just 12 seconds. And if I write it to something, or if you see, I just filtered it on top of some data frame and drop it some columns. He will not work until an action is performed. So here collect is an action. As we are as we are executing an action here, it will perform unless an action is executed. Till all of the transformations, it just builds the query. I think you got that part. If not,
Yes, Shantanu. So whenever I perform a preview kind of operation after one mapping or else one join, so it will be showing the data, right? So in such case, is it performing action, right?
Yeah. Display, collect, print, or count. So we'll have some actions and some transformations. So the display isn't action. In that case, it will perform.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you just see some list here. So the top things are transformation. So mapping, filtering, joining, group by sort, unions, intersections, all of those are transformations, and actions are count or some save as text file, saving. All these comes under actions. Yeah. Okay. I just got one good image here. So this is actual DAG. So I am using two RDDs and I am writing it into a file. Okay. So here RDD1 is converted into some RDD2. And whenever we have an action, it will go through the DAG and it will perform all the code. And here I just want to explain one more thing. So consider I have one more arrow from this transformation. So I'm writing it. So here I have an action and I'm writing it to another file. So what happens?
So I think it will be directly using the existing DAG.
Actually, no. So for action one, what it will do? It will go through these RDDs and it will get the final RDD and it will write. So if I call one more action 2 here, so from the same RDD, on top of the same RDD, if I call one more action here, what happens? It will perform all the steps again.
Yeah, that is what I said. Like we'll be going through the RDD, like the DAG again, and it will be doing the operation.
Yeah. Is that a correct method? Is that the correct thing?
No, I think you can get it from actions. Like you can put some kind of reference to that action, DAG to action, and you can directly get that if the DAG is repeated, you can directly put that to the action, like a connection to the action.
Okay, I think you are getting it, but the exact thing here is, so we'll persist the data frame here. It's kind of optimization technique. So once if I persist a data frame, it will store the data frame in our memory. And one more thing, Spark works in memory. So completely all the transformations, actions will take place in memory. And it will not be so in other. So if you are dealing with other frameworks, what it will do? So it will write some files to disk and then get the data back from disk and then load it into main memory. Other frameworks work in that way, but in Spark, everything will be done in the main memory itself. If we have a place in the main memory.
Okay.
Okay. So what happens here? So when I first create an action, it will create an RDD. And when I hit an action again, instead of going through all this, if I want to get directly from this RDD, what should I do? I should persist. So persist. So it's like storing the corresponding data frame in a cache. And using the cache from here. So that is regard.
Take the last cache, like last RDD as a cache, or else it is persisting all RDDs.
No, it will persist only this RDD, right? So as I just mentioned, it will not.
RDD.
So if you want to persist this RDD, you can also persist this RDD. As we are getting the data from this RDD, we will be persisting this.
Okay.
Architecture and actions and transformations diag, all those. Okay, and coming to the UI part. Okay, let me. So I think everyone of you know about this Databricks. So whenever you create a Databricks instance in the backend, so here we have created a dev instance. So Azure Databricks dev instance in some corresponding resource group. So what happens in the background? So he'll create 3 more resources. So if you see here, we have this managed resource group. So he will create this managed resource group by default. And inside the managed resource group, we'll have 3 resources. So one is DBFS, that is the blob storage. Other is the VPN, and the third one is the number of CPUs we require. The number of CPUs required. So it's like a number of virtual machines. So the 3 resources will be virtual machines, VPN, and the storage. We don't have access.
Okay, is that a data factory, like data blob is only for their like Databricks purpose, or else can we save anything in that like particular?
Yeah, it's only blobs for Databricks purpose. We don't have access for this, but I cannot show this. We don't have access to view that. It's just 3 resources. It will be completely for Databricks itself, Santosh.
Okay.
So we'll have a Databricks file system. That is the storage part of Databricks, and the storage part is this blob that got created under this resource group. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And here, this launch workspace. Just get rid of this. What happened? Okay, this is Databricks UI, and what we have is create workspace recent. This is the normal thing. So here we have this compute here. So this is the base for clusters. It's like the heart of Databricks. So here we'll be creating clusters in compute part. So when you create a cluster, what you should be taking care of is the cluster name is normal thing. The cluster node will have 2 modes here, standard, high concurrency. Okay, I don't know about the single node. It's a new one, I guess. So standard is the normal thing which we use, and high concurrency is when we have number of people using the same cluster. We should be going with high concurrency cluster, and if not, in general we'll be going with standard for dev purpose. Yeah, and Databricks runtime. Here you can choose the corresponding Spark version. And here these two options are important options. So what is this? We have enable auto scaling and terminate after some minutes of inactivity. So what is this enable auto scaling means? So as I just mentioned, we'll have one master node and a number of worker nodes. So if you see here, so the master node here is called as driver type and the worker nodes are called as worker type. So if I enable, so you just see this. So as it is enabled, the minimum workers nodes are 2 to 8. So if I disable this, we'll have fixed number of worker nodes. So when we can use this? So if you are dealing with data that varies from, that varies a lot. So consider we are dealing with 100 MB files and also we are dealing with 100 TB files using the same cluster. So in that case, we'll be using this enable auto scaling and we'll be fixing this minimum workers and maximum workers. So when we are dealing with 10 MB file, we'll have one worker node and two master nodes. Sorry, one master node and two worker nodes. If we are dealing with 100 MB, 100 TB file, then we'll be switching up to 8 or the corresponding according to the requirement. We'll be pushing up the worker nodes. So that is
Shantanu,
auto scaling. Yeah.
can I create multiple clusters so that I can take one notebook and give that notebook to the particular cluster? Like, if suppose I am processing a big data, like terabytes of data in one notebook, can I give a particular cluster to that particular notebook? And I'm dealing with some GBs of files, and I want to give, the less,
got that. Yeah, got that question. Yeah, got that question. So your question is like, so I have two requirements. So one notebook, so using one notebook, I'll be running 10 MB file and I have another notebook that is dealing with 100 MB file. So if I want to use different notebooks for different files, can I do that? Yes, you can do that. Yeah. So if you see this here, so this is a notebook and here we'll have an option to choose the corresponding cluster. So if you see this, so in our instance, we have two clusters, one is 3 MB, other is RIM. You can use any of the clusters for any notebook. So you can attach a cluster. Yeah, we can attach specific to your notebook. Okay. So it's not like we'll be attaching the same every time. we can use any of the cluster at any time. So if I choose 3 MB now, and if I want to shift to remove, you can just change it to remove.
Okay, suppose if I am accessing this Databricks notebooks via some data factory or some other third-party tools. So in such case, what cluster will be used? Is that the one which is selected right now, like which is there while we are saving, or else there we can pass the cluster?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. You can pass the cluster in data factory or from where you are. So if you are triggering from data factory, so while creating a linked connection for Databricks, we can choose the corresponding cluster. So again, in cluster, we'll have two types of cluster. I was just about to explain that. So one is the job cluster, other is the interactive cluster.
Okay.
Okay, so in general, for production purposes, we'll be going the job clusters and not the interactive clusters. So the cluster here, which we are using, is an interactive cluster. So what's the difference between interactive cluster and the job cluster? So job clusters, so if you see this here, we are naming a cluster and we are setting corresponding configurations for the cluster, and we'll be having these configurations and the corresponding name of the cluster every time in the corresponding instance. Okay, and coming to the job cluster. So whenever you trigger a Databricks notebook from Data Factory, it will create a job cluster on the fly. We'll be providing the corresponding configuration. So what should be the configuration of the job cluster? So whether it should be it should be a standard purpose cluster or high concurrency cluster. We'll be we'll be mentioning all those details while creating a linked connection in Data Factory, and we'll be using the job cluster there. Okay, I'll just show you that also.
So can we use the saved one? Like just
I just I'll just show you that. Yeah, you will get to know. Just a minute. Do anyone have Data Factory open? Okay, I got that. Okay, so here when you create connection, okay, let me just create a new connection here. Databricks, right? Where is okay, complete Databricks. Okay, and here, sorry. So here, this is the linked connection we'll be creating from ADF. So what all the options we have here? Naming, and this all are the things you can mention directly. And here, if you observe, select cluster. So here we have three options. So one is selecting a job cluster, or selecting an existing interactive cluster, or selecting an existing instance pool. So this instance pool is a new option in Databricks. So it's like maintaining some VMs up all the time. So consider, so if I mention a pool with 4 VMs, he will be providing us the 4 VMs, and we should be paying for those 4 VMs 24/7.
It's kind of a dedicated tool.
It's kind of a dedicated VMs. Yeah. And you just asked me, can we use this IAM interactive cluster? Yes, we can use. So while creating a linked service, you will be selecting the corresponding option here. And this access token, I'll just let you know what is a PAT here. You will be giving the corresponding PAT. And here you will get the list of options. Okay. So I have 3 MBI and remove, right? So you can get 3 MBI, you will be getting 3 MBI and remove here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can do it. Okay, access token. So, and what is this access token? So, in order to authenticate this Databricks, we'll be authenticating from any of the resource using this access token. How to generate that access token? So, in Databricks, in user settings here, we'll be having an option to generate a token. So once you generate a new token here, it's dev, right? I can generate. Let me just check. It's dev. Okay. So you can generate this a new token, and you will be using the corresponding token to navigate to Databricks from any of the resource, or to authenticate. I can just say to authenticate. Here is Databricks. Okay. Access token. So see here. So we got 3 MBA and remove. These are all the, these are the two clusters we have in our corresponding dev instance of Databricks. Okay. And if not, we'll be in general for production purposes, we'll be using the job cluster. And for corresponding, in order to specify the configuration of the job cluster, we'll get all the configuration details here, and we'll specify the corresponding configuration details. And a cluster will be spinned up during the production job. Okay.
So is that we are able to see while running the cluster only, or else we can see that cluster that we have created here in the database notebooks?
Did not get the question, bro.
Suppose like it is creating a job cluster on the fly, right?
Yes.
So on the fly, we can see in the Databricks notebook, we can see that one job cluster is running. So after completion of this job, are we able to see that cluster there, or else it will be, or else a demolished kind of thing like?
There means here in Databricks.
Yes, in this Databricks, in the cluster, yeah. While running the Databricks job, we'll be able to see, I think, here what are the clusters.
So running. Here, this is so in job cluster we can see, but not in the all-purpose cluster.
Okay.
So here we'll have a option of job cluster. So I think someone might have started the job in dev, and that is why it's getting started. Is it me? Did I trigger? No.
So where can I see
so
that configurations for the
okay,
job
I just showed you, right? No. So here, if you see cluster versions, node type, Python version, and number of workers, auto scaling option here. So if you want to add some init scripts, you will be adding some init scripts. Is this your question, the configuration part, or?
No, like in the, the cluster part, it is running, right?
Yeah, it's running.
By clicking on that, can we see the configuration of this?
Okay, you want, okay, yeah, you can see that. Okay, this was the question. Okay, got that. Yeah. So this is regarding job cluster and interactive cluster. And okay, Any doubts regarding clusters? No. If no, I'll move on.
From my side.
Okay then. Okay, and one more thing we should know while dealing with Databricks is Databricks pricing. And I'll say you why we are using job cluster instead of interactive cluster. So coming to the pricing part of Databricks. So if you see here, we have two tiers. One is the standard tier and other is the premium tier. Depending upon the features we use, we'll be using the corresponding standard tier and the premium tier. And inside the standard tier, we'll have three different workloads. Consider this as sub feature. I mean sub tier of the standard tier. So we'll have all purpose compute, jobs compute and jobs light compute. So if we are using the corresponding features, so if I'm using the Databricks feature of this, I'll be considered under jobs light compute. So if I use this feature, I'll be considered the jobs light compute and I'll be paying the bill corresponding to this. So if I am using this interactive cluster, so as I just mentioned, we will be using job clusters and not the interactive clusters. So if we are using interactive clusters, we will be under the highest, highest workload of a standard tier, and we will be charged according to this. So if you observe the changes here, so for all purpose compute, it's around $0.40, and for the job slide compute, it's only $0.07. So when you are using features of Databricks, make sure that you will be using the features that are under jobs compute and job slide compute. If that's not possible, if we have that feature only in all purpose compute, then we will be using the same. But if not, try to minimize, try to use these features itself to get our job done in order to reduce the cost. And one more thing, he will not mention that you are using all purpose compute or you are using jobs compute, you are using the corresponding workload. If you are using this feature, he will just charge us. He will not mention those details at all. So make sure that you try to get the solution using less features if possible. And that's the reason. So we have moved from interactive cluster to job cluster in our notebooks. So before an year or before an year and a half, so we were using interactive clusters and we are also using some features of these notebooks and collaboration. So what's this notebook and collaboration feature is that, so we can use multiple languages in a single notebook. I'll just show you how we will be using. So as we are using these two features, we are under this all purpose compute. And we have shifted our code. We rewritten the code, everything in Python again, that is the PySpark, and we eliminated this. And we are using job clusters now, and we eliminated this feature. As we have eliminated these two features, we are being charged under this job compute and not this all-purpose compute in 3M. Okay. Okay, and how to create a notebook and all those. So here we have a workspace. So inside workspace, it's just like folder architecture. So in general, in shared will be, in our project, what we are doing, we are maintaining the code in the shared folder. So this shared and the users are the default folders provided by Databricks. We'll be using the corresponding development or corresponding dev activities in the corresponding notebooks, the corresponding folder. And in shared, we are maintaining the production code or the finalized code. So, okay. And And these are generally called as Jupyter notebooks. We will be using Jupyter notebooks to develop in Databricks. So if you observe here, so let me just create a new notebook here. So how to create a notebook? Here we'll have an option and be creating a notebook. Corresponding name and the default language. So as we have 4 languages, so what should be the default language we will be using for this notebook? Consider I want to use Python. I'll be naming the Python and I'll mention the cluster here. So you can change the cluster at any time. It's just the default cluster which should be tied to the corresponding notebook here when you create. So once it is created, we'll be having a one notebook here and the default language would be Python. And if you want to change the language, so here it's in Python. Now I want to write some code in Scala or some Spark SQL. So what we should do? So just mention Scala and write print something. And if you want to use SQL, just mention the SQL percentage SQL and use this select star from some table.
Is that a case sensitive or else sensitive?
This part percentage SQL,
Yes,
it's case
yeah.
sensitive. Sensitive, bro. Okay. So this is called as this that a collaboration feature, a notebook collaboration feature. And earlier we were using Python and Spark SQL, but we now moved on to Python completely. These are just Python notebooks. I mean the Python one. And how to create, I'll just say you what we do and how to create a data frames or all those. So in order to create a data frame, it's like a data frame which you are creating manually. It's just the syntax here. I'll just share the notebook. You can go through this syntaxes once, and if you have any doubt, let me just know. I'll explain that syntaxes if you don't get that. Okay, I'll share this file with you all. So in order to display or show, so okay. So what we are doing here, let me just go through one. So we are building a data frame here, and we are building some data frame here, and we are doing some transformations like group by, and ultimately we are showing or displaying here. So we'll have, so in order to see a data frame, we'll have two options. One is using dot show or using display. Okay, these are considered as actions. So when I trigger an action, it is when this steps this actual execution takes place of the above steps. Okay, and yeah, and before that I forgot to mention about this RDDs, data frames and data sets. Yeah. So what is an RDD? RDD is a data structure that we use in Spark. It's like resilient distributed data. So RDD, so okay, RDD is like this. So it will be, so here consider this as an RDD here. So for an RDD, we will not have a definite schema or definite column name. It's just like key value pairs. So if you observe here, it's like ID and name. ID is one company, GGK, ID 2 company Infosys. It's just like key value pairs. In order to write some group bys or joins, what should we do using RDDs? We should write all the mappers and reducer using these RDDs. In order to avoid this, we have another set of data structures on top of RDDs, that is data frames. So in data frames, so if you observe here, this is a data frame. So for a data frame, consider this as a data frame. For a data frame, we will have a definite column name and the corresponding values, and not like a list of tuples. So RDD is a kind of list of tuples. we should be dealing with the mappers and reducers. So in order to just write a simple group by function, we need to write those mappers and we need to write those reducers if we are using RDD. And if we are using data frames, we can just use the group by or join or anything on top of that. So ultimately, these data frames will be converted into RDDs. And RDDs, I mean, he'll write the mappers and reducers for us. So if you are just mentioning group by some column, he'll write the mappers and reducers in the backend.
Is the then is a traditional is built on top of
Sorry, I did not get that question actually.
like
Can you come
it is
again?
a kind of a traditional thing, and we are building a data frame. I mean, data frame on top of it.
Yeah, we are building a
We build
data frame
on top of it. It's a kind of library for data frame.
Yeah, you are
RDD.
exactly right. Yeah, it's a kind. Our data frame is a kind of library for RDDs, as just Santosh mentioned. And we have one more data type called data sets. So for data sets, it's like strongly binded. So what does that mean? I'll just give an example between data frame and data sets. So if you are, so consider I have a data frame 1 and I have a data frame 2. I have 3 columns in data frame 1 and 3 columns in data frame 2, and I am unioning those 2 data frames. I'm unioning those 2 data frames and then writing it to a file. So when I union those 2 data frames, I will not get any error if I am using data frames. And if I am using data sets, we should specify the data type. We should specify the data type at the starting itself. So if I am unioning that, I will get a compilation error if I use data sets, and if I use data frames, I will not get any compilation error. It's like I'll get only runtime error and not the compilation error. Okay. So did you get that? The basic difference between data frame and data sets is that we'll be mentioning the data type for data sets, and there is no particular mentioning of data type in data frames. Okay, if you guys get this, can someone say me, can we use data? So what among these 3 can be used in Python? RDDs, data frames, and data sets. Can we use these 3? Sorry.
No,
Can we use these 3 data types in Python? Yes or no?
Data frames RDDs we can. Data sets we need to specify types, right? By doing union on these things.
Yeah, can we use that data? Can we use data sets in Python? Yes or no? No answer.
No, I think.
Okay, if the answer is no, and why? Why can't we use data sets in Python? Hello. Yeah, who just mentioned that no? Can you give an explanation for that? Okay. So in C, how do we mention a variable? It's like in
will be explicitly giving int or double kind of things.
Okay, and in Python, what we do?
Sometimes we'll be giving some variable.
Yeah, and so it's a dynamic type of language, right? Python.
Yeah.
And what's the basic difference between data frame and data set?
It's a like we are explicitly passing the types for data sets. It should be
Yeah.
type specific. It should not be dynamic.
Yeah, you are right.
Yes.
And that's the reason we cannot use data sets in Python. So in order to use data set, we should be going with Scala itself. We don't have an option of data sets in Python. So that is regarding RDTs, data frames and data sets. And in most of our project, we'll be dealing with data frames itself. I mean, as we are dealing with PySpark, in our project, we are dealing with data frames. Okay. Yeah, that is regarding that. That is, and then, so how do we add libraries to Databricks? So coming to that part, so how do we add that? So it's just like creating a notebook. Any doubts, bro? Okay. So it's just like creating a notebook. So you'll be creating, you'll be importing a library. So here we'll have different library sources and we'll select some corresponding. So basically, as we are using Python, we'll go with PyPy and we'll mention the corresponding package here. So consider it as some CSV. Oh, CSV type much but okay. Exactly simple JSON. So we'll be creating a library here and we can use the corresponding library in any of the clusters. So if you see here, if I want to install this library in all the clusters, we can opt this. And if some of the clusters available, we can we'll get a list of clusters here and we can select the corresponding clusters and click install here. So that we'll have, so consider if we have a use case of using some corresponding libraries for corresponding purposes and not for all the others, then we can, I mean, it can be cluster specific. These libraries can be cluster specific. That's the thing I just want to mention. And we have one more way to get these clusters into our instance or into our cluster. So what's that? It is using init scripts. So what is an init script? So if you just see here, so it's just like a booting program. So when we boot our system, we'll be having some, I mean, some programs will run backend at the computer boot time, right? The system boot time. So in the similar fashion, if we are mentioning some init scripts, it's like initialization scripts. So we'll be mentioning the init scripts in the advanced options. So here, while creating a corresponding cluster, we'll have this advanced options, and inside the advanced options, we'll have this init scripts. So here we have mentioned some path. So what's the path? It is the path in Databricks file system. So in the starting, I mentioned that we'll be having some blob storage, and that's the storage part of this Databricks. So we'll be writing some, we'll be putting some code in the corresponding location. So inside DBFS, inside some Databricks in scripts path. So I am placing the file in this path. And so I'll just show you how do we put that also. Okay. Scripts, okay. So here we will be having this DB utils. It is the library through which we can deal with the file system of this Databricks. So what we are doing using this DB utils library, we are putting some corresponding text in this location. So I'm using the corresponding blob storage and I am putting this code in some location. And I want to execute this when my system starts. So if you are so corresponding, so if you want to install some JSON library, what you'll do, you'll just mention pip install some JSON library. You'll just mention this in the corresponding location. I mean, you'll put the corresponding text in the corresponding location. And when you start a cluster, this program will get initiated automatically. So whatever the score, whatever the code you have in init scripts, it will get, I mean, it will be executed automatically. That is regarding init scripts.
So I think Shantanu, it will be useful whenever there is a new versions that are coming, like then we don't need to explicitly update every time. In such case, it will be useful, right? Mostly,
Yeah.
like,
Yes,
otherwise we
yes,
can directly.
yeah, we can directly use that. So I'll just explain a scenario in our project. So in our project, we should get some drivers as well.
Okay.
So we should get PyODBC driver. And not only the libraries, we should also get the libraries. So in order to get the libraries, we don't have an option through UI. And that's the reason we just have had that code in the corresponding location. Okay, where did it go? Yeah, I mean, you also mentioned the correct use case, bro. You can mention the path there and you can get it from that. That will also work. I mean, we can also use this init scripts in that scenario as well. Okay. That is regarding init scripts. Okay, let me just complete the cluster part again. So in the advanced options, so what do we have? We can specify the Spark configuration. Let me just start. You will get to know. So so these are the default configurations for any Spark context. So how many driver nodes? Something like one. Spark.driver. So number of cores for a driver node, it should be 1. So if you want to change this, or if you want to change any of the default key value pairs, so what should you do? You should mention the corresponding key value pair. So if you want to change the number of cores of a worker node to 2, by default we have 1 here. If you want to change the number of cores to 2, so what should you do? Just copy this or corresponding, whatever the configuration you want. Okay, if it's starting, so you'll be just mentioning the corresponding values here. It's like mentioning the key value pairs here. Once the cluster gets started, we'll have an option here.
Okay, you can show that in Data Factory also, right? There we have this option.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks, bro. Thanks. Okay. So here we have this Spark configuration, right? So here you'll give some drivers, and if you want to change the default to 2, you will be giving the corresponding key value pairs here. So in the similar fashion, you'll be giving it here. I think you got this Spark configuration. You should be knowing this. We'll use this. I mean, and one more thing, as Databricks, so most of the projects or most of the scenarios, we are getting data from ADLS, and that's the reason this Databricks guy provided default authentication to data lake storage here. So you can enable this data lake storage, and you will be passing the corresponding credentials of data lake storage here, and you can use it directly in your notebooks instead of authenticating it again. Okay, just mentioning this feature here. That's it. And here the tags gives you the corresponding name or the corresponding configuration of Databricks cluster. So if you see here, we'll be having some name cluster ID. Yeah, this will be unique. This is you'll be using this in Data Factory. You can also use this in Data Factory to get into this cluster. And
so that means we are getting these tags. Yeah, that means you are getting these tags as an output, like output JSON in the output of that activity, database output activity. Are we getting all these tags as output?
As output, where?
Like the after the completion of the job, we'll be getting the output activity, right? Like some output, somewhat like a JSON. We'll be getting some output.
Okay.
Yeah, after that.
Yeah. This,
yeah, right. Where we are getting this type.
So
tags.
I'm not sure about that, bro. I did not see that output.
Okay. Like, is there any jobs that you can check once? Like,
Yeah.
any pipelines
I did
that
not.
are run?
Yeah, I did not get the question exactly, but let me just.
It's like we are running some jobs, right? There we'll be getting like I mean, Databricks notebooks will be ran, and we'll be getting output for every activity, right?
Okay, let me just go through one thing. And so this is our pipelines.
Just go to the data feeds.
So you are mentioning that. So okay.
Yeah, this kind of output.
This
We'll
kind
be
of
getting
output. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be getting for Databricks also, right? So
Yeah. That was yes.
yes, you said we will be able to access those tags in Databricks, right? So data factory.
Not Axis. I just mentioned. You can use that.
Like we can
so
use that, right?
yeah.
That means. We'll be
I mean,
like,
we'll not get that. So it's like instead of providing the name here, so while creating a linked service, we just got 3 MBI and remove, right?
okay, yeah.
So instead of that, so it's a recent update actually. Earlier, what we were doing, so when we were using interactive cluster, we do not have that option of directly loading the clusters there. So we use it to get the cluster ID from here.
Okay.
We use it to get the cluster ID from here, and we will be mentioning the corresponding cluster ID there.
Okay.
But in the recent update, we are getting the list of clusters there. I was just mentioning that part. So if in future, if you want to use any cluster ID, and you will be getting the cluster ID and the corresponding cluster information from here, tags. Now that is what I want to explain. Yeah, that's it. And in its script, I just mentioned. So this is regarding the UI part. And one more thing. Load. So as I just mentioned, the default values. So you can see it in the Spark UI in environment section. You can see all the corresponding configuration values. This is where you can see. So in the clusters in Spark UI in environment.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. In the jobs, executors. You'll get the executor details here. Yeah, that is regarding the UI. Any doubts regarding the technical part? I did not went through what we do in the project yet.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we can continue the project part tomorrow. This is the technical part.
Okay.
Or did I miss anything that I'll మీకేమైనా తెలిసినట్టు నేను మిస్ చేసి ఉంటే చెప్పండి చెప్తాను అంటే నాకు గుర్తు రావట్లేదు ఏమైనా మిస్ చేశానా ఓకే you'll be using generate token I just mentioned and okay I'll just mention one more feature ఏదో గుర్తొచ్చింది just complete చేస్తాను so here we'll have this revision history. It's like you can get to the corresponding version at corresponding time. So what was this notebook at? I mean, how was this notebook at 426? You can get it and you can restore the corresponding version here. It's just like Git or it's just like versioning Databricks. You'll have this revision history option here. And you can use these comments. Yeah.
For every edit, we'll be getting some revision history. For every edit or else for specific time.
Not for every edit. He'll just mention that he'll be maintaining for every 1 minute or 2 minutes. I mean, if we have an edit, if we have any change, I mean, I'm not sure about the time, bro, actually. I'll let you know. I'll know this and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I have seen something like in the access token, like the next one, I have seen Git integration. Is there any custom configurations that we can
Yeah.
set?
Okay. Yeah. So you can also integrate it to Git, but we are not using this Git integration in our project. It's just like I mean, you'll be attaching it to some repo and you can use that, bro. You'll be using same like a repository. I did not use this, and I'm not aware of this also, as we are not using.
We're using the Databricks revision next, like the Databricks Git. It's the default, like, is that the default in Databricks, or else we need to something like?
It's revision history is a default one in Databricks.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll get it by default. And this number, okay. Top number. What to mention? So when you import your library, you'll get it here. Okay, did I? So I think the cloning part, it will just duplicate the notebook and renaming move to trash, import and export. Okay, so okay, let me just say this regard import and exports. So you can import and export notebooks from Databricks. So while exporting, you will be having source file. Okay, when you are at Databricks level, I mean when you are at notebook level. In general, what we do in our project, we'll be exporting it using source file. So if you are, it's like .py file. It's just different kind. So if you want to export in DBC, it's like encrypted mode. That DBC is encrypted mode. Source file .py mode. HTML, the complete notebook HTML1. And IPython notebook. It's just like one more Jupyter notebook. These are just the versions. I mean, type of the notebook you want to export. And if you are exporting at folder level, you'll be using DBC archive in general.
Okay.
And if you want to import some files, you'll just import it from local or from some URL. This is how we import and export files. You'll be selecting corresponding file here and you'll be importing it. Yeah, okay. Okay, this is regarding that Databricks technical part. So tomorrow we'll be discussing how we use this in our project, and we'll discuss some topics like what is Databricks Delta and what are the join strategies we use in Databricks. We'll discuss these topics tomorrow. If you have any doubts till now, you can post it now. If not, we can leave.
No questions.
Okay then.